By the time you're born in this country, your health is compromised. Roughly half of our health was programmed between conception and our second birthday. You spend the first nine months inside, and if she's under a lot of stress, then that stress is transmitted to the fetus so that by the time it's born, it's already sick.
Hello, this is Raymond, New York Times top 10 bestselling author, bringing you Respark Your Life podcast, the world's premier podcast to ignite the fire to allow you to live life on your own terms. Every single Thursday, I bring you a multi-millionaire, world-famous celebrity to teach you about the most fascinating ways in order to live a far better life. Every single Thursday, you just need to subscribe by hitting the subscribe button. I'll see you every Thursday to respark your life.
Yes, this is Raymond Aaron, but this episode is going to be my favorite of all time. I know I've done hundreds of them, but this is special because it's about your sickness. Why are you sick? And what can you do about it? I know. You think it's because you eat too much meat or you smoke or you drink alcohol or you don't exercise enough. I know you think that. But my guest today, who's been a lifelong friend, has a fascinating and completely different way of understanding why you are sick. And I want to introduce him personally by telling you that on the first day of university studying maths and physics, we met each other. Hey, Chris, I'll redo that. On the first day of university studying mathematics and physics, we saw each other and fell in love. And we've been in love as dear friends for over 60 years. And after we graduated from maths and physics, I took a severe right turn and decided to become a professional speaker, teaching lots of different subjects. And Steve took a whole different right turn and went into meds, became a medical doctor. And then he went into a branch of medicine that I'd never heard of, population health. And I didn't know what population health is, but what am I doing? I shouldn't be answering these questions. Steve should be answering them. Steve, what a joy to still be alive. You and I are both still alive, and we're both in a wonderful relationship. Even though we live 3 time zones away in different countries, we stay in touch. And I'm honored to interview you, my dear friend.
Thank you very much, Raymond, for having me. It's, our lives go back a long time, and I've learned a lot from you.
And me from you, and now my subscribers are going to be learning from you. So first of all, what is population health?
Well, if we think of the health of us as individuals, when we use the word health, we usually mean you and I as individuals. But if we take the entity as the country, as the population, as a society, what does health mean there? So, I worked as an emergency doctor for over 30 years, and the easiest diagnosis I could make in the ER was that somebody was dead. Hard to fake. I then filled out a death certificate and sent it into the provincial or state entity, and that was merged with the birth certificate, allowing you to calculate how long that person lived. You didn't always rely on what they might say. I mean, if they're dead, they may not tell you their age, and you may not have that record. So if we look at these rates of death, mortality rates, we can come up with a measure of the length of life of a population. if the mortality rate stayed the same. That measure is called life expectancy, and it would be the number of years lived on average for that population if mortality rates stayed the same. So to me, life expectancy is a measure of the health of a population. And then we can begin to ask questions as to why this population lives longer lives than that one, and try to fathom reasons for that. And this has been my greatest learning tool over many, many years. To be more specific, I created the phrase or the term Health Olympics, the ranking of countries by this measure, life expectancy. So we now have a population health measure, and we can compare countries. Since countries compete in Olympic events, suppose the event was how long people in the country lived. Therefore, we call this the Health Olympics.
Okay. And you now, even though you're Canadian, you now live in the United States. The United States is the greatest country in the world. It's probably right at the top, probably getting all the gold stars.
Yeah, I wish that were true. But let's say back in 1996, Canada would have tied for the silver medal.
Oh.
And the United States at that time would have been 25th.
Oh.
So if we take, in the actual final event in the Olympics, you eliminate those with who didn't do well in the trials. So the United States would have been eliminated in the trials and not be there for the final event. So that was 1996. Let's fast forward. So I use the same data source to be consistent all the time, which is the United Nations Human Development Report, published every year. It gives Table 1 gives every country's life expectancy. And the latest data from the UN is 2023, at which time Canada was now 16th, and the United States was 42nd.
No. Well, what are the countries that do well?
So many, many other countries people have longer lives than people in the United States, and those longer lives are, of course, healthier. So then you have to ask the question, why? Why is Canada once number 2 or tied for the silver medal, now 16th? And United States, back in the 1950s, the United States was in the running. It was somewhere in the top 5 countries by life expectancy. And what's happened since then is, although life expectancy tends to increase year after year, the increases are bigger or faster in other countries than in the United States. So what might explain this? Well, to begin with, the United States spends half of the world's healthcare bill. In 2026, it will be over $6 trillion, a sixth of the total economy. And as I said, half of the world's total healthcare expenditures.
So add up all the countries in the whole world, and the United States spends more than that.
Spends about the same as all the other countries put together.
God, that's amazing. And it still doesn't work.
Well, that suggests that there's something other than healthcare, at least if spending money on healthcare is a measure of what healthcare represents. Something other than healthcare is more important. And so what might that be? And that gets us into asking the question, what makes a population healthy, as differentiated from what makes an individual healthy?
Okay,
So
I don't want you to just go past that, because when you first taught me this decades ago, that was my gigantic inquiry. What do you mean? Isn't population health the sum of all the healths of each individual person? How can they be different? So before you go on, I want you to give me an example of how an individual or lots of individuals can do what apparently is unhealthy, and yet the population is healthy. How can that be?
Okay, so let's take cigarette smoking. We probably agree that that's not a healthy behavior.
Correct.
Let's take the longest lived country in the world, Japan. It's been the longest lived country since 1978. And I've been to Japan a few times. And one of the things that always strikes me in Japan is to see men smoking. And about 3 times as many men smoke per capita in Japan as in the United States. So suppose if we think personal behaviors are important for health, then that must be why Japan is so healthy. All the men smoke. But of course, we know that that can't be true. And so why is it that in Japan, smoking doesn't impact your health adversely like it does in the United States?
Wow, that's amazing.
So this relates to features of a population or a society that are different. And the way I always explain this for Japan is, do you ever see a lone Japanese tourist?
No.
They're always together, right?
They are.
Do you ever see a lone Canadian or American tourist?
Sure, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. So they do things together. And this is called wa, or social harmony. So so the group has behaviors, they look out for one another instead of just themselves. And that's one example of a factor affecting a population that is different from what individuals do. So,
wow.
That's taking a behavior, smoking. We can similarly look at other personal behaviors, diet, exercise, all sorts of other things, and realize, important though they may be for producing health, other things are more important. And I could go into a fair amount of detail about this, but we've already seen that a personal behavior, such as cigarette smoking, doesn't impact Japanese as much as it does, say, people here, and that medical care also isn't as important as we think it does. And that social factors, such as the collective nature of Japanese society, seems to matter.
Wow. Now, Steve, I want you to hit the jackpot and tell us your big thesis. This is the big one. This is when Steve told me this, I said, no, that couldn't possibly be. So let's hear it. This is the shocker.
So one of the things that explains the health of populations is the gap between the rich and the poor. The bigger the gap between rich and poor, the more economic inequality, the worse the health outcomes.
Say that again. That's the biggest statement of this entire podcast interview. Listen carefully to this and make sure you understand it.
Well, a society with a big gap between the rich and the poor, where a few rich have way too much and the rest of us have to share much, much less, creates a lot of stress in society. I think you used to say, if you're not the lead dog in the race, the view is always the same. I think that was a Raymond Aron quote some time ago. So when the lead dog is so far ahead and you have you know, what are you looking at all the time? That's pretty stressful. So,
But this is even more shocking, and I'm gonna let the surprise go, and I'm gonna say it because I'm so excited. You would think, or my subscribers probably think, oh, the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates and the Steve Jobs of the world, they're at the good end of the wage disparity, so they must be healthy. And then 99% of the population is unhealthy. But what you're saying is, even for the ones at the top, even the high income people are less healthy.
yeah, so let's just take somebody you mentioned there, Steve Jobs, who's died. He died at age 56. That wasn't a very long, healthy life. As to Elon Musk and others, they haven't died yet, but the richest people in the United States die at younger ages than considerably less rich people in the Western European countries. We have good data from England or Sweden, similar data from Japan. The rich don't live long, healthy lives in countries with a big gap because they're exposed to a lot of stress. You remember, the Forbes billionaires list was something I used to always track. Every year it would come out and who's the richest person, second richest, and so on. So one year, this junk bond trader, Michael Milken, made the Forbes billionaire list. And a friend was congratulating him. Hey, Michael, you made the Forbes billionaire list. And Milken said, yeah, but I'm at the bottom.
He just barely made it.
He just barely made it, and he was at the bottom. So, why we now have the world's first trillionaire, and he's up there to sort of try and strut his status, because that's all you do when you have too much. You accumulate more. It's easier to accumulate more, and that puts you in the grave rather sooner. Think of all the rich people that died quite young. Elvis and Janis Joplin, and as I said, Steve Jobs, Marilyn. Being rich and famous doesn't get you out of the graveyard.
Okay, so let me challenge you. Let's take a country that doesn't have a giant income disparity. Let's say Cuba, communist Cuba. And they don't have huge billionaires and millionaires. They just don't. And so, but I don't think they have good health care. So tell me, do the population, is it healthy?
So first of all, notice you said Cuba, they don't have good health care. So we conflate the terms health and health care. We say we access health, pay for health, get health, insure health. All those mean health care. So we have to clean up our language. I always tell my students, when you use the word health, are you really meaning health care? So let's take your example of Cuba. Using the 2022 data on the ranking of countries by life expectancy, the United States was tied at 44th with Cuba.
Oh my gosh.
So the United States, we had the same life expectancy as Cuba in 2022. Now, what has the United States been doing to Cuba for the last 60 some odd years? We've been strangling it. And yet the length of their lives is the same as the length of lives in the United States.
But shouldn't we expect Cuba to do better than the United States because they have almost no income disparity?
That's a good question, but don't forget, we've had an embargo on Cuba for the last 60 plus years, and that's not a healthy thing.
Right.
So, how would you feel if the noose was, being tightened around your neck and increasingly tightened? And today, who knows what's going to happen? But, the embargo on even any energy flowing into Cuba is not a healthy situation. Today's front page of the New York Times had a story about kids not going to school in Cuba because, they don't have any electricity to light the classrooms. But,
Wow.
it says, so back in 2022, I said we had the same life expectancy as Cuba. And then a lot of other countries, Chile, Slovenia, Costa Rica, Turkey, China, they all had longer lives than people in the United States.
So are you saying that the only thing an American can do is fly to Costa Rica, start living there?
So that's a very important point. Can you improve your health by leaving the United States and going somewhere else? I have some friends, doctor friends, who've decided to quit this country and go to New Zealand or Australia. Now, I don't say something unless we have several very good studies on the topic. And we don't have any studies of the health of people leaving the United States and going elsewhere. We do know that immigrants to the United States tend to have better health than the people born here. One of them is called the Hispanic paradox. Latinos and Latinas that come from Mexico into the United States tend to have longer lives than the people that were born here. So one of the ways to...
Why? Because they're not jealous of Elon Musk?
So that's really important. So, I have to rely on personal experiences in addition to data. What I've quoted is data. And working as an emergency doctor, I never saw a Hispanic patient alone in the emergency department. They were lying there, and the whole bunch of people, friends and family, were there to support them. Meanwhile, over here, there's a white guy moaning alone. In other words, the social cohesion, the counterpart to wa in Japan, is there for the Latino patients. And they can count on a lot of social support, and that is really beneficial for health.
Now, I've read that in the blue zones, there's about 6 blue zones in the world, that one of the factors that creates it is the social cohesion.
Correct.
Everybody knows everybody in the town.
That's correct.
Wow, I live out in the country. I don't know my neighbors.
So the question is, at our age, what's really important? Well, it is the various networks that we have, but you haven't asked the import. So inequality kills us all. That's the title of my 2023 book, and you can download it for free on my website, open source, StephenBezruchka.com. The other important factor is reflected in the title of my most recent book, published this year, Born Sick in the USA. It's a takeoff on Bruce Springsteen's song, Born in the USA. And so let's dissect that title. By the time you're born in this country, your health is compromised. So roughly half of our health, sitting here talking to each other, was programmed between conception and our second birthday. So by the time, so you spend the first nine months inside your mother's womb, and if she's under a lot of stress, if life is difficult for her, then that stress is transmitted to the fetus, and that compromises its health, so that by the time it's born, it's already sick. And we can demonstrate this very, very well. And so by the time you're blowing out 2 candles on your 2nd birthday, roughly half of your health as an adult has been programmed. Wow. So healthier societies privilege that period. What are ways in which they can privilege early life? Well, one way is to give a woman who's pregnant paid time off after she has her baby as a national policy. There are only 2 countries in the world that don't give a working woman who's pregnant paid time off as a national policy. One is, of course, the United States, and the other is Papua New Guinea, half of a big island north of Australia. Think of that. The only 2 countries in the world that don't privilege early life by having a national policy of supporting early life. The United States passed the Family Medical Leave Act in 1993 that gives a working woman who's worked for a company for a year or more. Now it's 3 months of time off, work with no pay, and after that you can fire her.
Oh my gosh.
Now, what is it in Canada? In Canada, it's a much more generous policy, roughly a year at 70% pay, and it varies from province to province, is paid for by unemployment insurance, and often the employer tops that up. There are other ways in which early life can be helped by government policies. When you and I were growing up in Toronto, every month our mother and father got a check from the government. It was a baby bonus check. All you had to do was be alive to get that check. And if you were the richest person in the country, then if your father was the richest person, he'd get the same check. It was not means tested. Well, fast forward to the present, Canada still has the so-called baby bonus checks. It's now means tested. So if you're a billionaire, of which Canada has a few, you're not going to get the check. So that's an example of an early life policy. How about others? Well, daycare is much, much cheaper in Canada than in the United States. I had a graduate student who finished his PhD, and he moved to Montreal. And he'd had a baby. He and his wife had a baby, and I learned from him that daycare in Montreal, in Quebec, was $8 a day.
What?
That's what it is.
Wow.
Yeah. And here, daycare is incredibly expensive, and so that compromises the health of young people. So as you go from the erection to the resurrection, those first 1,000 days are critically important for your health, and countries need to support that period in order to be healthy.
So are you saying that it doesn't matter whether I smoke, drink alcohol, take street drugs, eat too much fried food? Like, that doesn't matter?
I didn't say it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter that much.
Really?
I mean, how much is that much? Well, the so-called smoking paradox in Japan explains part of that. I had always read that in Okinawa, one of the prefectures in Japan, the diet was mostly pork fat and noodles. And then I went to Okinawa, and what did I see? I went to the market and I saw huge slabs of pork fat. I saw they eat Spam all the time. Spam is a delicacy. And in people's homes, what did they serve? Pork fat and noodles. I mean, I experienced this, so in addition to reading about it, I could vouch that it was true. So what is the secret in Japan that allows them to eat foods we consider unhealthy and yet have the longest lives in the world? Well, they have a phrase, hari hachibu. Stop eating when you're 80% full. And Japan has a metabo law. That is, employers in Japan are supposed to measure the waistlines of their employees when they're over age 35. And if the tape measure exceeds a certain limit, the employer has to provide a program to get their employees to lose weight.
Wow.
It becomes the responsibility not of the individual, but of society.
This is so fascinating, Steve. Even though you've told me about this many times, and even though I've read one of your books, it always startles me. It's always so amazing. It seems fatalistic. It seems like I should give up. It seems like, well, I'm born in Canada. This is it. This is what I got. Almost no matter what I do, my life expectancy is foreordained.
Well, I wouldn't be quite so harsh on yourself or, the people on the podcast, doing what do? I try to use my brain as much as possible. My exercise capacity is much more limited, but, this morning I did some exercises after I got up, and, it makes me feel better. And those are habits once they get ingrained. They're good habits. I never smoked. I used to pride myself, while I was a vegetarian for years, I used to pride myself on my low cholesterol, all that sort of stuff. But these other factors matter more. You and I were born to parents that cared for us and nurtured us. Your father had some interesting beliefs with the Natural Hygiene Society. I think you used to fast periodically. That's probably a good behavior if you believe it's important. So these things that we do personally, if they help us feel better about ourselves, that's good. We just can't expect them to be as important as these factors that affect populations.
Dear subscriber, this, I'm sure, is shocking you, that the things that you do, that doctors tell you to do, that chiropractors and physiotherapists tell you to do, and books tell you to do, exercising and eating well and eating organic when you can and don't eat fried food, they're not as important as societal matters. And they're in his book. So you can go to Amazon. So Steve, please tell them the name of the title of both of those books.
So the most recent one is called Born Sick in the USA, Improving the Health of a Nation, published by Cambridge University Press this year. It's $30 US. You can go to bookfinder.com and maybe order a cheaper used copy. Previous book is called Inequality Kills Us All, and it was published in 2023 by Routledge. And if you go to my website, StephenBezruchka.com, it's available for a free download as open source. And also on my website, I have a whole bunch of other stuff. I try to make everything available as open source or free. Let me mention, since we're talking about books, my after medical school in 1974, I went to work in a place a week's walk from the road, setting up a community health project. And so we wrote a book about it called Far from the Road, a community health project in the Himalayas. And there's the four of us authors. And I took this picture of a shaman going into a trance to divine the health of a person and say what needs to be done. And the back cover has another village nearby with that's quite remote as well. So I've learned a lot from these various experiences. As you said, and I quote on page 9 of Inequality Kills Us All, life is just lessons. You remember that? I quote Raymond, and I've learned a lot from you over the years, and I've tried to take the lessons that I've learned, as some of the ones I've mentioned, that have required me to change my mind. And changing your mind is one of the best ways of discovering whether you still have one or not.
Stephen, you have been a joy in my life for 6.5 decades. I love you. I'm so happy we're together, and you've done a dazzling podcast guest job, as I knew you would. And I know that my subscribers are racing to buy one of your books.
Or download for free.
Thank you, Stephen. Wow.
It's my pleasure, Raymond.
Wow, I sure hope you enjoyed that fascinating episode. Please make sure you've subscribed, and please tell your friends if you like it that they will probably like it as well. For your information, this experience, this service, this podcast has been sponsored by the Orbit Coaching Program. All of my friends, all my world-famous speaker friends, all have coaching programs. Mine has been independently rated as the #1 high-level coaching program. You cannot purchase it. You have to audition for it by me personally. If you're interested, please email me at respark@aaron.com. respark@AARON. Say that you're interested in being considered for the Orbit Coaching Program and include your cell phone number so that I personally will call you back.